never imagined grief could feel so heavy, so crushing, until the day I buried my husband. The church was dimly lit, the air thick with incense and the faint murmur of prayers. My hands trembled as I clutched the folded handkerchief that Robert used to carry in his suit pocket, now damp with my tears. We had been married for 47 years, and in those years, we had built a life filled with laughter, sacrifice, and memories that felt carved into the very walls of our home. He was my anchor, my partner, my confidant, and now, lying silent in that coffin dressed in his best navy suit, he was gone. My daughter Emily sat beside me, her face pale and streaked with tears, while distant relatives filled the pews behind us, whispering softly as though afraid their voices might shatter the fragile air holding me together. But then, as the priest began the final rites, the heavy wooden doors of the church creaked open, and everyone turned to look. A woman stepped inside, her heels clicking against the tiled floor with a confidence that felt out of place at a funeral. She was tall, elegantly dressed in a black coat that shimmered faintly under the light, her dark hair perfectly styled, her face composed yet unreadable. She didn't look like someone who had wandered in by mistake. She walked with purpose, her eyes fixed on the coffin at the front of the church. A ripple of confusion spread among the guests as she moved down the aisle, ignoring their stares, until she reached the coffin. And then, without hesitation, she placed her hand gently on the polished wood and whispered words that froze my blood. "Goodbye, my love," she said, her voice trembling yet intimate, as though she were not a stranger at all, but someone who had known him deeply, secretly. The church seemed to fall into silence, every whisper swallowed by the shock of her words. I felt my stomach twist, my grip on the handkerchief tightening until my knuckles turned white. My mind screamed questions. Who was she? Why did she call him that? But my body sat frozen, trapped in disbelief. Emily gasped beside me, her eyes darting to mine, wide with horror. The priest cleared his throat, faltering mid-sentence, and glanced at me as though waiting for me to take control of the situation. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The woman straightened, her eyes glistening as she looked down at Robert's face, and then she turned to me. For a moment, our gazes locked, and in her eyes I saw not the sympathy of a stranger, but the sorrow of someone who had lost something just as precious as I had. And then she said it, loud enough for everyone in the church to hear. "He promised me he would leave the truth behind," she declared, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "And now you'll finally know everything." A collective gasp echoed through the room. My heart pounded in my chest, and the edges of my vision blurred. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, to throw her out. But something in the steadiness of her voice, in the certainty of her words, rooted me to the spot. Around us, murmurs began, whispers spreading like wildfire through the congregation. Emily clutched my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "Mom," she whispered urgently. "Who is she? What is she talking about?" I couldn't answer, because for the first time in 47 years of marriage, I realized there might be a part of Robert's life I knew nothing about. The woman didn't linger. She gave me one last piercing look, then turned and walked out the same way she had come, her steps echoing through the church until the heavy doors closed behind her. But her words remained, hanging in the air like a curse. I sat frozen throughout the rest of the ceremony, barely hearing the priest's closing prayers, my mind replaying her voice again and again. "Goodbye, my love. He promised me he would leave the truth behind." When it was finally over and people began to leave, Emily turned to me, her face pale. "Mom," she whispered, "what if she was telling the truth? What if he had a secret?" I wanted to deny it, to say the woman was delusional, some intruder seeking attention. But deep down, a small, terrifying voice whispered that it might be true. Because 3 days before Robert died, he had tried to tell me something important. He had reached for my hand in bed, his eyes clouded with pain, and murmured, "Margaret, there's something you should know, something I never told you." But before he could finish, his body convulsed, and within moments he was gone. I had convinced myself it was just his mind slipping at the end. But now I wasn't so sure. As I stood at the coffin one last time, placing my trembling hand on the wood, I whispered softly so only Robert could hear. "What truth, Robert? What did you hide from me?" My tears fell onto the polished surface, but no answer came. Only silence, heavy and suffocating. And as I turned to leave, I knew one thing for certain. I would have to find that woman again. Because buried in her words was a secret my husband had taken to the grave, and I wasn't ready to let it stay there. The morning after the funeral, I awoke to the sound of silence. For years, Robert's soft humming in the kitchen or the faint clatter of dishes had been my alarm clock. But now the house was empty, and the emptiness seemed to press in on me from all sides. My body ached with grief, but my mind was restless, circling back again and again to the woman from the funeral. Her voice haunted me, those words digging into me like thorns. "Goodbye, my love." He promised me he would leave the truth behind. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at Robert's dresser. The top drawer was still slightly ajar, as though he had left it that way for a reason. For months before his death, I had noticed him fumbling with it late at night, slipping papers inside, locking it quickly when I came near. I had dismissed it as bills, receipts, ordinary matters, but now I wasn't so sure. I rose, my legs trembling, and walked across the room. My fingers brushed the handle, hesitating. What if I found nothing? Or worse, what if I found proof that Robert had lived a life I never knew? Finally, I pulled it open. Inside were neat stacks of papers, just as I expected. Bank statements, insurance policies, old tax forms. But tucked between them was an envelope, unmarked, sealed tightly. My breath caught. My hands trembled as I tore it open, and inside was a single sheet of paper in Robert's careful handwriting. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and I never found the courage to tell you what I should have told you long ago. There is another part of my life, another truth, that you deserve to know. Find her, she will explain everything. Her name is Eleanor." The room tilted around me. Eleanor. That must have been the woman at the funeral. My heart pounded as I read the last line, written in shaky script, as though his hand had struggled to finish. "Do not hate me. I thought I was protecting you." I sank onto the bed, clutching the letter against my chest. Protecting me from what? From her? From the truth? My mind swirled with questions. Had Robert betrayed me with this woman? Was she his mistress, his lover? Or was the truth even darker than that? Emily found me like that an hour later, sitting in the shadows with the letter in my hands. "Mom," she whispered, stepping into the room. I looked up at her, my eyes swollen from tears. "Her name is Eleanor," I said softly. "That woman from the funeral. Your father, he knew her. He wanted me to find her." Emily's eyes widened, and she sank onto the bed beside me. "Do you think she was his mistress?" The word stung, even spoken softly. I shook my head, uncertain. "I don't know, but I have to find her, Emily. I can't live with these questions gnawing at me." Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Then we'll find her together." The following days were a blur of searching. I asked distant relatives, combed through old address books, even called a few of Robert's colleagues from decades past. No one knew the name Eleanor, or at least no one admitted to it. Just as I was beginning to despair, Emily found a clue buried in one of Robert's old business folders. It was a receipt for a small lakeside inn, dated only a year ago, signed not by Robert but by someone named Eleanor Grant. My breath caught when I saw it. Why would Robert have kept this? Why would Eleanor's name appear on something he had paid for? That weekend, Emily and I drove out to the inn. It was a quiet place, nestled among pines and overlooking a shimmering lake that glowed golden under the afternoon sun. My chest tightened as I walked into the lobby, clutching the receipt in my hand. The clerk behind the desk looked up with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm looking for someone. Her name is Eleanor Grant. She stayed here last year." The clerk's smile faltered, his eyes flicking toward a stack of papers. He hesitated, then said, "Yes, I remember her. She comes here often. She should be here this weekend, actually." My heart lurched. "She's here now?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, in cabin 4. The world seemed to narrow to a single point. Emily touched my arm, steadying me. "Mom," she whispered, "do you want to do this?" I nodded, though my whole body trembled. "I have to." We walked down the gravel path toward cabin 4, my pulse hammering in my ears. The little cabin stood at the edge of the lake, its porch framed with hanging flower baskets. I climbed the steps and knocked on the door, my hand shaking so badly I nearly missed the wood. For a moment, there was silence. Then the door opened, and there she was. The same woman from the funeral, dressed simply now in a cardigan and jeans, her face bare of makeup, but her eyes just as piercing. She froze when she saw me. "You came," she said softly. I swallowed hard. "You said he left the truth behind. I need to know what you meant. Who are you? What were you to my husband?" Her gaze softened, and for the first time I saw not defiance, but sorrow in her eyes. "I am Elena," she said, "and I was not his mistress. I was his secret, and yours." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning I couldn't yet understand. Emily's breath caught beside me, but I could only stare, my heart thundering in my chest. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Eleanor stepped aside, motioning for us to come in. "I think it's time you learned everything Robert never told you." The cabin smelled faintly of pine and old books, a comforting yet haunting scent that made the moment feel heavier. Eleanor closed the door behind us and gestured toward a small wooden table by the window. I sat down slowly, my hands folded tightly in my lap, while Emily lingered close, her eyes fixed suspiciously on Eleanor. The woman moved with a quiet grace, pouring us each a glass of water before sitting opposite me. For a long moment, none of us spoke, the silence thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Eleanor broke it. "I know you've been wondering what I was to Robert," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to fill the room. "I want you to hear this before rumors twist it into something else. I was not his lover, Margaret. I was his blood." Her words stunned me. "His blood?" I repeated, struggling to grasp her meaning. "Yes," she said, nodding slowly. "I was Robert's daughter." The glass in my hand slipped, water spilling across the table as I gasped. Emily rushed to dab it up with a napkin, but her eyes were wide with shock, mirroring my own. "Daughter?" I whispered, my heart pounding. "But how?" He never said, he never mentioned. Eleanor's expression was full of quiet pain. "Because he didn't know me until it was almost too late. My mother met him before he met you. They were young, foolish, caught in a whirlwind. He left before he ever knew she was pregnant. She never told him until much later. By the time she did, you and Robert were already married. He chose not to destroy your life with the truth." My stomach twisted, 1,000 emotions warring inside me. Shock, betrayal, sorrow, even anger. "So all these years," my voice cracked. "All these years he had a daughter he never told me about? He lied to me? He lied to our children." Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes glistening. "He didn't want to lie, Margaret. But he thought he was protecting you. He thought if he admitted it, he would lose everything. Your love, your trust, the family you built together. When he finally came to me, it wasn't to start a new life. It was to make peace with the old one. He visited me sometimes, quietly, secretly, not because he didn't love you, but because he didn't know how to explain." I pressed a hand to my mouth, my chest heaving. Emily looked between us, pale as parchment. "So you're saying," she whispered, her voice trembling, "that you're my half-sister?" Eleanor gave a weak, tearful smile. "Yes, I suppose I am." The weight of the revelation settled over us like a heavy cloak. My mind replayed decades of marriage, of shared laughter and struggles with Robert, the nights we had talked about our children, our hopes, our dreams. Had he carried this secret with him all that time? Had he thought of her, of Eleanor, while sitting across the dinner table from me? But before I could spiral too far into anger, Eleanor pulled a folded piece of paper from her cardigan pocket. She laid it gently on the table and slid it toward me. "He left this for you," she said. "For all of you. He gave it to me before he died and told me I would know when to deliver it." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was Robert's handwriting again, shaky but unmistakable. "Margaret, if you are reading this, then Eleanor has told you who she is. I never had the courage to speak it aloud, and for that I am deeply sorry. But she is my child too, and she deserves to be part of our story, not hidden from it. I loved you, always. I loved our family, always. And I hope one day you can forgive me for my silence." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed the letter to my chest, my body trembling with grief and confusion. I loved Robert, and part of me always would. But now, staring at Eleanor. I couldn't decide if I felt betrayed or if I felt pity for a man who had tried so hard to balance love and truth and had failed at both. Emily touched my arm gently. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What are we supposed to do now?" I looked at Eleanor, who sat across from me with tears shining in her eyes, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, as though she feared rejection. My chest tightened with conflict. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell her to leave, to accuse her of ruining the memory of my husband. But another part of me, deeper, quieter, saw the sadness in her eyes, the loneliness of a woman who had lived her whole life as a secret. I drew a shaky breath. "I don't know," I admitted softly. "But whatever we do, nothing will ever be the same again." The words seemed to hang in the air, final and heavy, as the shadows lengthened across the cabin walls. Outside, the lake shimmered under the fading sun, as if holding its own secrets. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The air inside the cabin felt heavier with every passing second, as though Robert's ghost had taken a seat at the table with us. I clutched the letter so tightly my knuckles turned white. Eleanor sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the wooden floorboards, while Emily leaned against me, pale and trembling. None of us seemed to know what to say. Finally, I broke the silence. "Why now?" My voice cracked, brittle with grief and anger. "Why show yourself only at his funeral? Why not come earlier, when he was alive, when he could have explained himself?" Eleanor's shoulders slumped, and she let out a slow, pained breath. "Because he asked me not to. He wanted to tell you himself, but every time he tried, he lost his courage. He told me, 'Margaret has carried me through everything. I can't repay her devotion with heartbreak.' So I stayed hidden. But before he died, he gave me something, and he told me I must give it to you when the time came." My pulse quickened. "Something?" She rose slowly, crossing the room to a small travel bag tucked in the corner. From it, she withdrew a worn leather box, its brass clasp dull with age. She carried it carefully, like something sacred, and set it on the table before me. "He wanted you to have this." With trembling hands, I unlatched the box. Inside were documents. Old deeds, certificates, and envelopes neatly bound with string. My eyes scanned the first one, and my breath caught. It was a deed to a property I had never heard of, a lakeside estate, registered in Robert's name. Another envelope contained bank documents, showing an account with a staggering sum of money. My hands shook as I flipped through the papers, each more shocking than the last. Emily leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Mom, he was hiding all of this from us?" Eleanor nodded softly. "He didn't hide it to hurt you. He hid it to protect you. That money, that property, it wasn't from his business, Margaret. It came from something else, something he never wanted you or Emily to know." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Eleanor hesitated, then leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Robert wasn't just the man you knew. Before you met him, he was involved in things, dangerous things. He walked away from that life, married you, built a new future. But the shadows of his past never completely left him. That estate, that money, it was part of it. And before he died, he told me someone might come looking for it." My blood ran cold. Emily's hand gripped mine tightly. "Someone? Who?" she asked, her voice trembling. Eleanor's eyes darkened, her jaw tightening. "People who don't forgive debts. People who don't forget. He told me that if they ever came, I had to give you everything. Because the only way to protect you was to make sure you held the truth, not just the lies." The room spun. I felt faint, as though the ground beneath me had crumbled. My husband, the man I thought I knew inside and out, had lived a secret life, one that now threatened to reach into our present. I pressed a hand against my chest, struggling to breathe. "So you're saying," I whispered, "that Robert left us not just with grief, but with enemies?" Eleanor's gaze met mine, steady and unflinching. "Yes, and they will come, Margaret. That's why you needed to know the truth, because his past is no longer just his. It's yours now, too." The words struck like thunder. I stared down at the leather box, its contents suddenly feeling less like a gift and more like a curse. My world, already shattered by Robert's death, was fracturing further, pieces falling away faster than I could hold them together. Emily's voice quivered beside me. "Mom, what are we going to do?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down I knew this wasn't just about discovering Eleanor, or even about Robert's secret estate. It was about survival, and the storm that had been quietly brewing in the shadows was finally on its way to our door. The ride home from the cabin was cloaked in silence. Emily sat beside me, her face pale, her eyes staring out the window without really seeing the road. The leather box sat heavy on my lap, as though its weight was pressing against my chest. Eleanor had given it to me without asking for anything in return, but the look in her eyes as I left lingered with me, a mix of sorrow, fear, and something else I couldn't quite place. When we finally pulled into the driveway of my house, dusk had settled in. The air was cool, the kind of cool that seeps into your bones and makes you shiver even when you're not cold. Emily carried the box inside while I fumbled for the keys with shaking hands. As soon as we stepped through the door, the familiar smell of lavender polish and old wood wrapped around me, usually comforting, but tonight it felt suffocating. I set the box on the kitchen table, and we sat in silence. The clock ticked loudly, every second hammering against my nerves. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice trembling. "Mom, do you believe her? About Dad's past?" I closed my eyes, pressing a hand against my temple. I don't want to believe it. But those papers, the money, they don't lie. Your father, my Robert, kept all of this from us. And if what Eleanor said is true, we're not just dealing with secrets. We could be in danger. Emily swallowed hard, tears brimming in her eyes. Danger from who? Dad was a good man. He wasn't a criminal. I wanted to comfort her, to say she was right. But before I could, a sharp thud rattled against the front door. Both of us froze. My heart pounded as Emily rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain just a fraction. There's no one there," she whispered. I moved slowly toward the door, my hands trembling as I turned the knob. On the porch lay a small unmarked envelope. My blood ran cold. I picked it up, my breath shallow, and carried it back to the table. With Emily clutching my arm, I tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper, with words written in blocky, uneven handwriting. "We know what Robert left you. Give it back or you'll regret it," Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My knees buckled and I sank into the nearest chair. The paper shook in my hands as I reread the words, my chest tightening with panic. "They know," I whispered. "Emily, they already know." Tears streamed down her face. "What do we do, Mom? What do we do?" I pressed the note flat against the table, my mind racing. This wasn't just about Robert anymore. It wasn't about Eleanor or the lies or even the money. This was about survival. Whoever these people were, they weren't bluffing. Robert's past had finally caught up with us, and now it was clawing at our door. I looked at Emily, her face streaked with fear, and took her trembling hands in mine. "We have to be strong," I whispered, forcing steadiness into my voice. "We have to protect ourselves. Your father wanted me to know the truth for a reason. Maybe there's something in that box. Something that can help us." Emily nodded weakly, and together we opened the box again. As we sifted through the documents, I noticed something I hadn't before. A smaller envelope tucked at the bottom, sealed with wax. Robert's handwriting scrawled across the front. "For Margaret. Only when the time comes." With shaking fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, shorter than the first, but far more chilling. "Margaret, if you are reading this, it means they've found you. Do not trust anyone, not even those who seem to be helping you. The only safe place is where it all began. Follow the map inside. Trust no one else." I pulled out the folded piece of paper tucked behind the letter. A map, hand-drawn, leading to a location marked deep in the woods outside of town. Emily clutched my arm, her eyes wide with terror. "Mom, what does this mean?" I stared at the map, my heart thundering in my chest. "It means, Emily, your father knew this day would come, and if we want to survive, we have to follow his trail." The night passed in restless silence. Emily and I barely slept, both of us jolting awake at the slightest sound. The note from the strangers and Robert's warning gnawed at my thoughts like teeth on bone. By dawn, my decision was made. We had to follow the map. Whatever Robert wanted me to find, it was our only chance at understanding this nightmare, and maybe protecting ourselves from it. Emily protested at first, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Mom, what if it's a trap? What if they're watching us already? They are watching us, I whispered, glancing at the curtained window. That's exactly why we have to move. Sitting here will only make us easier prey. If Robert left us this map, it means he planned for this moment. And I trust him, even now. We packed light, just a flashlight, a thermos of water, a few sandwiches, and the leather box tucked safely into my bag. By mid-morning, we set out, following the hand-drawn map into the woods at the edge of town. The deeper we went, the quieter the world became. Birds fell silent, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The path was narrow, overgrown with roots and moss, as though nature itself wanted to keep it hidden. Emily walked close behind me, her hands clutching her jacket tightly, her eyes darting at every rustle of leaves. After nearly an hour of walking, we reached a clearing. In the center stood a small, weather-beaten cabin, almost swallowed by ivy. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt alive, like it had been waiting for us. This must be it, I murmured, my heart hammering. We approached cautiously. The door creaked open at my touch, revealing a dim interior filled with dust and shadows. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air smelled of old wood and damp earth. But beneath the decay, I sensed purpose. This wasn't just a forgotten shack, it was a hiding place. Emily wandered toward a wooden chest in the corner, her fingers tracing the lid. "Mom, look at this," I hurried over. Together, we lifted the heavy lid, coughing as dust billowed into the air. Inside were bundles of old documents, photographs, and journals bound in cracked leather. On top lay another letter in Robert's handwriting. My breath caught as I unfolded it. "Margaret, if you've come this far, it means you've chosen to face the truth. What you find here is my past. Everything I never told you. I left that life for you, for our family. But I couldn't erase it. These papers, they are evidence, proof of things powerful people want buried. If you hold them, you hold protection, but also danger. Use them wisely. And above all, trust no one but your blood." Emily gasped softly. "Mom, this is what they're after. This is why they left that note." I sifted through the documents, my hands shaking. They contained names, transactions, photographs, pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. But one thing was clear. Robert hadn't just been a man with a secret daughter. He had been tied to something much bigger, something dangerous enough that even now, people were hunting his memory. Suddenly, a floorboard groaned behind us. Emily stiffened, her eyes wide. We weren't alone. I turned slowly, my heart in my throat, to see a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. It wasn't Eleanor. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The man's voice was low, steady, and chilling. "You shouldn't have opened that chest." The cabin's silence shattered under the weight of that man's voice. Emily clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin as though she could anchor herself to me. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out every other sound. The man stepped further into the room, his boots crunching on the wooden floorboards, his figure now clearer. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face half hidden under the brim of a worn hat. His eyes were cold, eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "I've been waiting for this," he said, his gaze flicking to the chest of documents. "Robert was a fool to leave it all behind. And you're bigger fools for opening it." I forced my voice to remain steady, though my throat was dry. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" He smirked faintly, but there was no humor in it. "You don't need to know my name. What matters is that those papers aren't yours. Hand them over, and maybe I'll forget you ever existed." Emily shook her head, her voice trembling but defiant. "These belong to my father. If he left them for us, then they're ours." The man's smirk vanished, replaced with a shadow of menace. He stepped closer, and instinctively, I pulled Emily behind me. My hands shook, but I met his gaze, refusing to bow. "You don't understand what you're holding," he hissed. "Those papers, they could topple men in high places, politicians, businessmen, people who built empires on dirt and blood. Robert was supposed to destroy them, but he didn't. And now, if they stay in your hands, you won't live to see another sunrise." His words chilled me to the bone, yet they also ignited something fierce inside me. Robert hadn't destroyed the documents. He had trusted me with them. That meant something. That meant he believed I was strong enough to carry this burden, to protect Emily, to survive. I straightened my back, clutching the edge of the chest. If these papers are as dangerous as you say, then they're the only protection we have. Because if something happens to us, I swear they won't stay hidden. Everyone will know the truth. The man's eyes narrowed. For a long, tense moment, I thought he might lunge at us, take everything by force. But then his lips curled into a dark smile. You've got more steel than I expected, Margaret. Robert chose well. But steel won't save you for long. He backed toward the door, his shadow stretching across the dusty floor. You've bought yourself a little time. Use it wisely. They'll be coming for you soon. And trust me, they won't be as polite as I am. With that, he slipped into the darkness outside, leaving the cabin silent once more. Emily collapsed into a chair, her face pale, her breath ragged. Mom, he knows our names. He knows us. What are we going to do? I pressed Robert's letter against my chest, feeling the weight of his words. Trust no one but your blood. The truth was clear now. These papers were more than secrets. They were weapons, and if Robert's enemies wanted them destroyed, then perhaps keeping them was our only leverage. I looked at Emily, her eyes full of fear and questions. We're going to do what your father couldn't, I whispered, determination burning in my veins. We're going to finish what he started. The chest sat open on the table, the documents inside glowing faintly in the lantern light, like embers waiting to spark a fire. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of danger. But for the first time since Robert's death, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready to fight. The days that followed were a blur of fear and preparation. Emily and I barely slept, our minds trapped in constant cycles of what-ifs. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light outside the window, every anonymous knock at the door sent shivers down my spine. Robert's chest of secrets sat hidden beneath the floorboards, yet its presence felt heavier than any stone. On the fourth night, it happened. The door slammed open, the sound echoing through the cabin like thunder. Men poured inside, 3 of them, masked, armed, and merciless. Emily screamed, and I instinctively pulled her behind me, though my body trembled with terror. Where are the papers? One barked, his voice rough, practiced in intimidation. I forced my breathing steady. We don't have them. A lie. One I knew they wouldn't believe. The leader's gloved hand cracked across my face, the sting hot and humiliating. Emily cried out, but I shook my head at her, silently begging her to stay strong. The men ransacked the cabin, tearing through drawers, overturning furniture. The world seemed to collapse in chaos until suddenly, one of them found the chest. Here, he shouted. I lunged forward, desperation overriding fear, but another man grabbed me, pinning my arms. Emily rushed to my side, her fists small and useless against their strength. The leader pried open the chest and pulled out the bundle of documents. His eyes gleamed with triumph, but then his smile faltered. He flipped through the papers, confusion etched on his face. These aren't complete, he muttered. Where's the rest? I met his eyes with all the fire I could muster. You think Robert left us everything? That's what you'll never understand. He knew men like you would come. What you're holding is worthless without the missing pieces. For a moment, silence hung heavy. The man's face darkened with rage, and he raised his fist as if to strike me again. But a voice from the doorway stopped him. Enough. It was the same stranger from before, the broad-shouldered man with cold eyes. He stepped into the cabin, his presence commanding, and the 3 intruders froze. She's telling the truth, he said. Robert never trusted anyone completely. Not even me. The full truth is hidden somewhere else. His gaze locked onto me, sharp as a blade, and she knows where. The masked men hesitated, then retreated, clearly unwilling to challenge his authority. One by one, they slipped out into the night, leaving only him. He studied me for a long time, the firelight casting shadows across his hardened face. Robert once told me you had more courage than anyone he'd ever known. Tonight you proved him right, but courage alone won't keep you alive. The people behind this, they won't stop, and when they find the missing pieces, it won't just be you or Emily. It'll be the entire legacy Robert tried to protect. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. And then tell me what I need to do. For the first time, his expression softened, just slightly. Finish what he started. Expose them. Don't let his sacrifice be in vain. He tossed a small notebook onto the table. This will help you. It has names, places. But once you open it, there's no going back. And then he was gone, vanishing into the night as silently as he had arrived. Emily clutched my hand, her eyes wide with fear, but also with something else, determination. "Mom," she whispered, "we can't run forever." Dad wanted us to fight. Maybe it's time we did. I held her close, tears burning my eyes. Robert's secrets had torn our lives apart, but in that moment, I realized they had also bound us together more tightly than ever before. We weren't just victims. We were survivors. We were fighters. The chest sat empty on the table, its secrets scattered into the world. But the real battle, the one Robert had begun, was only just beginning. And as the first light of dawn broke through the cracks of the cabin, painting the sky with shades of fire, I knew one thing with unshakable certainty. We would not be silenced.